In this position, I noticed that there's quite an attack on the knight. Bishop and rook are attacking the knight twice, and so black is defending it twice. So obviously what I want to do is attack that knight further, increase the pressure on that knight. And so to solve this tactic, I used two concepts. First of all, the concept of adding pressure, and secondly, the concept of waking up all of the pieces, right? I noticed that this rook in a1 is doing absolutely nothing, so I wanted to do something for the team. So I look at check, capture, attack. I don't have any good checks. Capture, I only have one capture, but there's no reason to give the bishop pair for this knight, and so I went for the attack. And after a while, I figured out that the solution was going to be b4. Boom. Now, well, the bishop can't move to d6 because I'm attacking that square twice. So after b4, take, and now the bishop takes the pawn. Now, this allows me to play another piece into the game, waking up all of my pieces, and add another attacker to the knight. Pinning the knight, white gets a big advantage. In this position is queen and two bishops against queen and two bishops. It looks very drawish. The center is completely blockaded by pawns. So it looks like one of those positions where you're not going anywhere and it's going to be just a draw. But in reality, there's a winning strategy. So what is the weakness that I'm identifying? It looks like there's no weaknesses, but actually the pawn in d6 is a backwards pawn. So I know that if I take that pawn with my bishop, dark square bishop, then this pawn falls, every other thing falls, and I'm going to produce a lot of pass pawns. But for that, I need the board to be cleared, because for as long as the queen is on the board, that's not going to happen. So I excluded the idea of bishop takes bishop, queen takes back, because then I'd be depriving myself of my strongest bishop. So I thought, okay, I'm going to attack the queen, bishop like this, a4, and after all the swaps, I get to keep basically my dark square bishop, but the problem is that now the king will go to c7, and there's nothing here. It's opposite color bishop endgame, and it's going to be a draw. So that was when I realized that all I need to do is force the trade of pieces, whilst the opponent king, which is the only reason why I cannot take the pawn in d6, is far from the pawn in d6. And so bishop c4. Well, obviously going to a5 is not possible because I've got two attackers over a5. I'm going to win a piece. And when the queen goes to b6, here now I force a trade. Queen a6, check. Queen takes, bishop takes, king takes. Now I recapture the bishop, but this time the opponent king is far from the pawn. There's no way for black to defend it, and I'm going to clean up the board. In this position, we are black. Queen, bishop, knight against rook, rook, and knight. So black is completely winning. So at this point, I became a little bit overconfident, and I just realized that white doesn't have any checkmate, so I just played h6. But then I realized I failed the puzzle. Why? This is a pattern, and it's important to know. I thought my opponent doesn't have anything because knight g6, for example, with a double check, king moves, rook h8 is not checkmate because I can take the knight. But I failed to see something so easy that I already knew but I keep forgetting. Knight to d7 is a perpetual check. It's checked by the rook, so I must move my king, but then knight to f8 check. And the king can move to g6 because of the knight, and well, going backward just means knight d7 once again. It's a perpetual. So in this position, the crucial move, it's important to remember because this will happen to you, is h5. h5 wins for black, h6 draw. So knight d7, king moves, and now knight f8, you have more space to go to, h6 is available. In this position, I'm looking at loose pieces and also weaknesses. Like for example, okay, this is a loose piece, this bishop, it's got no one protecting it. This queen is also a loose piece. This rook is not loose because it's protected once, but it's only protected once. So that means it could be a target. This rook is protected by a pawn, so that means I'm dedicating very little attention to it because it's probably nothing to do with that. So the weakness I'm looking at is also the back rank. The back rank of my opponent is weak. So how do I combine the two weaknesses? Black specific back rank is a weakness. There's only one rook. And this loose queen is a weakness. I combine it like this. I'm going to move the knight. And whenever I do, let's say I move the knight to f4, there's going to be a double attack on the weak back rank. Two attackers, one defenders. And there's also going to be an attack on the queen. Now the question is though, where do we place the knight? Well, you have to place the knight in a way that everything makes a threat. For example, knight e7 doesn't work because after you lose the queen, you've got no good moves. You've lost the queen. The best move is knight to e7. The reason is simple. This is blocking the possibility for the black queen in g5 to protect its own rook in d8. So queen g5 doesn't work because rook takes rook and that's checkmate. Also, another good thing about knight e7 is that now I'm attacking the queen. Where's the queen gonna go to still defend the rook? Well, nowhere. The only move will be something like queen c7. But then, again, there's double attack on d8. So I'm just going to take the rook, queen takes back, and then knight g6, check, gives me a queen. So always try to combine multiple weaknesses of your opponent and find a move that exploits both or all of them. To solve this tactic, I used a very simple concept, which is the mobility of the pieces. So we have 2 rooks in a knight against 2 rooks in a knight, but you have to look at the weaknesses of your opponent. This knight is a loose piece. It's not protected by anyone. This rook is also not a very strong piece. It's only protected by a knight. This rook instead is protected by a pawn. So I'm not even going to bother looking at it because there's probably nothing to do with it. Now, of course, I'm looking at the captures. I'm looking at knight takes, but then I lose the rook. Do I have something that happens next? Definitely not. I'm also looking at rook takes knight, but then rook takes back, and I don't have any fork or anything else. So I'm looking rook takes rook, and then the knight will take me back. And that's when I realized that I found the solution. Because what did I just do? I forced my opponent piece to go to the corner where it has less freedom and strength as it could possibly have. After rook takes and knight takes, I was about to play rook c8 because I knew that it will trap the knight. The knight will have much less freedom in the corner. The knight in the corner only attack 2 squares at the very best. The best the knight can do from the corner is to attack 2 squares, whereas from the center it can attack 8 squares. So in the corner the knight is 4 times as weak as in the center. So after rook c8, then I realized, yes, the knight is trapped, it can't move anywhere. Both of these squares are attacked by my knight, which, being in the center, is much stronger than the black knight. But after rook c8, my opponent could play rook a4. Well, okay, then rook a2 is the winning. And obviously my knight is a very strong piece because it's defended by a pawn. This puzzle is very important. We're playing black, and the queen is pinning the knight, and the rook is putting pressure on the knight. So there's 2 pieces attacking this knight. The problem is there's a queen and a king defending it. Now, when your opponent king and queen, those are the 2 most important pieces of our opponent, when they're involved in defending something much lower value like a knight, then that's the time that symbolizes that something is about to go wrong, at least in this case for the white player. So I spent ages to solve this tactic, but then eventually I realized it was actually much simpler than I thought. I had no idea how to keep putting pressure on the knight. So for example, if I had had any other piece like a knight or a light square bishop, then I would have tried to put more pressure on the knight and win the piece. No other moves worked, like say bishop to d4 with an attack on the rook, exploiting the pin, and if the queen takes the bishop, I wanted to take the knight, but then I realized, oh no, the queen takes the bishop with check. But apart from that, it would have been a hope move anyway because the rook could have just moved and there's nothing happening then. So I thought, okay, if you cannot put more pressure on the opponent because you just don't have the pieces to do so, then see if you can remove the defender. This queen is the defender of the knight. Can we remove the queen? Well, it's very easy to remove a defender that is high value like a queen. So I realized my move was going to be a queen deflection. I cannot play rook a1 because simply queen e2, and I've lost the pressure on the knight. There's nothing here. I cannot play rook d3 because I get taken. So I thought, okay, how am I going to remove that queen from the defense of the knight? And that was when I realized the winning move is queen e4. Slow move, but it keeps the knight. And by the way, this is a forever pin because the king can never move. If the king moves, I win the piece. Now here I have a simple threat. Rook d3. Queen cannot stay in d1, cannot go to e2. She will have to move away, and then I can finally win the knight. Question is, can the white player do anything to stop it? Rook c3 doesn't work because I'll take it, and rook f5 is not possible. Rook c4 gets taken. So white cannot do anything. It's completely blocked off. Any move, let's say rook c6 with attack on this pawn, but then rook to d3, and I'm winning a piece. In this position, it's queen and 2 bishops against queen, 2 minor pieces, and a rook. So white is, materially speaking, completely lost. But you can see that there's a discover check. It took me a while to solve this puzzle because all I could think of was, well, move the bishop away, let's say h6, controlling this diagonal. And when the king moves, then I just didn't see anything good to continue with because even like queen h5 with the threat of another discover check, the problem is that the opponent has 2 major pieces, queen and rook. My king is not safe. And I want the move to come with check, but queen h5 doesn't come with check, and that's trouble. And of course, queen g7 is not possible because the knight is defending it. So then I just realized something really basic. Sometimes when you see a square of checkmate, let's say queen g7 is a square of checkmate. It's a typical checkmate, but it's stopped by the knight in h5. See if you can sometimes transfer the checkmate square somewhere else. The solution to this puzzle is very obvious. You just play bishop e5, it's a discover check. If king goes to h7, now you can take the knight with check. It's important to be able to take with check. If the king moves to f8, then you can take the bishop in d6. The queen is controlling the g file, and when the king moves, the checkmate square is being transferred to e7.